Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another session with David Whitehead here with us at the Full Circle Project. David is the Truth Warrior and is offering to share his experiences with us. David, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your enthusiasm and your insights into the warrior path. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Louise. Thank you. Pleasure to be back, and really been enjoying doing these shows with you.
Great. And today, I think we'll be looking at the masculine-feminine dynamic. So I'm really interested to see or hear your description of these two really fundamental principles, and learn how I can be more observant and integrate these into my practice and my daily life, really. I think that will be really interesting to see your view on that. So go ahead.
All right. Well, today we are going to be discussing the concept of the masculine and feminine principle. And this is something that is very deeply a part of the martial art tradition and of a part of the warrior philosophy in general, where we are bringing together two polarities in harmony and in balance, essentially, is what we're trying to do. And when we're talking about the principle of masculine and feminine, the most popular symbol you're going to see that definitely demonstrates that would be the yin yang symbol, or the taijutsu symbol. And this symbol is something that is very deeply rooted in also Taoism, which is the philosophy. It's talking about the Tao, which is the principle of the universal force that is completely interconnected and interwoven throughout all of nature. And it is also interconnected and interwoven inside each and every living being. And there's a balancing of the two polarities that always is trying to be, it's sort of like a battle that's taking place, a battle for balance, a struggle for balance. You can imagine yourself walking on a tightrope, or something where you need to be able to balance laterally. And, you take one little step in the wrong direction, you put a little too much pressure on one side, and you're going to fall off, right? So in a physical sense in martial arts, you see this in a lot of martial art dojos. You see this symbol everywhere. But it's interesting to me how a lot of martial art instructors don't really know the true history and depth behind this principle. And I feel like it really adds depth to the teaching that's taking place in the physical arena of martial arts. So in the physical arena of martial art training, you deal with balance constantly. If you're studying an art like judo or jiu-jitsu or aikido, these arts are really, really focused on this concept of the ebb and flow, intercepting force and redirecting force, taking an opponent off balance so that you can collapse that structure, and redirecting their balance in a direction that you want them to go. So you're absorbing an attack, for example, and you're to take that attack, redirect it, and guide it away from you, and guide it into to the defeat of your opponent. So that's really, on a practical sense, how this principle is seen. But what about consciousness, which is really the focus of this whole discussion, is what about the average person out there that might be listening to this show that is trying to achieve balance in their own lives? And I just want to stress that when we talk about balance, we talk about yin and yang. You'll also hear the concept of the masculine feminine, the balancing of the masculine and the feminine. And when we say masculine and feminine, we're not just talking about men and women, whether you're a male or a female. We're talking about how these are two principles that are deeply a part of each person, no matter what sex you are. And it would go through all of the cosmos, from the smallest to the largest. And this is something that even comes out of the Hermetic school. If you go back to ancient Egypt and you look at what they were talking about, you could go back to the ancient Druids and you'll find writings and discussions on this principle of balancing out these forces. I've been discussing this in great detail with Michael Tessarian on the Path of the Fool series that we've been doing on my show, about looking at the tarot and the symbolism behind the tarot, and how this is constantly showing, there are periods of time in your life where you're going to be thrown out of balance, and there's a process that you must take in order to finally come back to that place of balance again. If you watch Flowing Water, which is probably, I recommend, if you can go anywhere and watch water in a natural setting, if you ever have that opportunity, you should do it, because the principle of water demonstrates this beautifully, where you have two sides to what water does. Water can be still and calm. It can be like you're looking at a pond or a pool or a lake and it's just completely calm. It seems to be balanced, right? And then you can see water rushing and crashing, and water can be penetrating rocks. Water can also be incredibly destructive when it's, you look at some of these different tsunamis and all these kinds of things. Or if you watch how, the water's leading up to the edge of a waterfall and then crashing down, you'll see that water can demonstrate two principles in a basic sense. And when you study the works of someone like Bruce Lee, he was the founder of Jeet Kune Do, he would talk endlessly about this principle of water. Water can flow, water can crash. And he was always saying, be like water, my friends. And the reason he was saying that was because he was also illustrating this principle of the yin yang, of the masculine and feminine, about understanding that you have both of those elements. There's a time for peace and calm, like that pond, like that pool. And then there's a time for that energy that you have, that vibrancy that we all have, to be expressed. So that means that, you can't just suppress your energy. You can't just try to get that energy from some kind of false stimulant, like you need like 7 cups of coffee every day in order to get yourself out of bed or whatever. You need to try to allow that chi, that pranic force, to flow through you in a natural way. And you need to kind of follow it. You need to roll with it. And you need to learn how to, discipline it to a certain extent, and how to call upon it in its right form when you need it. So when we talk about the physical sense in martial arts, we're talking about understanding through technical training, understanding the principle of balance, understanding these different forces. And then in terms of your consciousness and the mindset that you have and by which you approach your life, you are looking at things through a balanced perspective. You are able to take, a point on one side and take a point on the other side and then bring it to equilibrium. And that's really what this is discussing. So the masculine feminine principle has been discussed and symbolized endlessly throughout history. And because we're talking about martial arts, we're going to talk about the yin yang. So I have a little write-up here on the yin yang for people, and I'll be able to include some links for people if they want to study further about this. But if you look at this in Chinese philosophy, the yin yang describes how opposite or contrary forces are actually complementary, interconnected, and interdependent in the natural world, and how they give rise to each other as they interrelate to one another. Many tangible dualities, such as light and dark, fire and water, expanding and contracting, etc., are thought of as physical manifestations of the duality symbolized by the yin-yang. And this duality lies at the origins of many branches of classical Chinese science and philosophy, and obviously, as we're discussing today, the system of martial arts. So this is really, again, the concept of duality, and these elements exist within each and every one of us. So if I can give you an illustration of the difference between a masculine principle and a feminine principle, I'll use a martial art concept. A feminine principle in martial arts would be that which absorbs and redirects, that which has a very fluid type movement to it. So you look at systems like Tai Chi or Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu, like I said. Jiu-Jitsu, which is the art that I have most of my degrees in, it's often said that it's the easy martial art. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy to learn. It's not easy to practice. It's the system of trying to find the easiest solution to a problem. That's really what we're trying to do here. So we're trying to take, a force that is coming at you, symbolized by an opponent that is trying to strangle you or hit you or take you to the ground or just to overcome you or whatever. If you look at that symbolically, what you're doing is you're wrestling with an opposing force. And you can either meet that force head on, so you could have one force and another force meeting in the center, and the strongest force will eventually overcome the weaker force. But in jiu-jitsu, the idea is that this has to be something that can be for anybody. It could be for your grandma, your neighbor next door, your 5-year-old child. It doesn't matter. It has to be something that works universally against a stronger opponent. So the only way that it could possibly achieve that is if this understanding of the masculine feminine principle is fully utilized and understood. And what we would need to do is find a way to redirect that force. So that would be very much a feminine type principle. And it's the idea of the soft art. That's also talked about in judo and jiu-jitsu as well, that this is the gentle way. This is the soft way. Although anybody that's been training it will find out very quickly it's not like we're sitting there just hugging each other and giving shiatsu massages. We are throwing each other around. We're throwing punches and kicks. We're grappling on the ground and looking for submissions. We're working with weapon training and all of this. But all these different modalities are just other ways of you experimenting. It's like you're in a laboratory as a scientist and you're experimenting with this principle of these universal forces. And so you're trying to learn how to master your body, your mind, and your spirit while applying these techniques. Because we look at the body as a vehicle by which you are interacting with the physical environment. And what powers that vehicle? Well, it would be your mind or your consciousness, the driver in the vehicle, so to speak. So you're trying to get your systems to align properly so that your mind, your body, and the energy that animates all of that is working harmoniously together and it's focused with complete attention into the moment, into that one particular action. And in the Japanese culture, it's the art of refinement, the art of cultivating refinement. So they would do things like calligraphy, very, very detailed calligraphy, which is interesting because calligraphy isn't just like connecting words writing like we do here with the English language. Calligraphy is something that is both technical, so it would be looked at as more like a scientific aspect, and it is also an artistic form. So you're illustrating a point on a piece of paper, but you're not just restricting yourself to a specific guideline. You are allowing it to move freely. The brush is moving in a little bit a more fluid motion, and you can see the masculine and feminine principle there expressed beautifully. The masculine side would be more the scientific, hard action side. So the masculine principle has always been associated with action, and then the feminine side is more of the creative, artistic, fluid type of side where it's looking for harmonization. And that's what the feminine is. That's what the goddess tradition is. That's what the divine feminine, people hear that going around. That's what that is. It's the harmonizing force. And I can see that even in my own household where my wife, she acts as that harmonizing force in my house. And with the children, she's got a particular way of dealing with the children. I have the more hard masculine way of dealing with it. But what's interesting is my wife and I have discussed many times that both of us have had to work on developing the other side of who we are in expressing ourselves as parents. So my wife needs, she would be like, maybe I'm too soft, maybe I'm too easygoing with it, so I have to find a way to bring in that other masculine element. And then I'm the same. I'm like, maybe I'm too masculine, maybe I'm too hard with it, maybe I got to soften things up. And we constantly hear these little things in conversation with our friends or whatever, and we don't really think of them as expressing universal principles that govern all of the universe. We usually just think of them as mundane daily things. But the concept I was talking about with regards to calligraphy and some of these things that we see throughout the samurai tradition and the martial art tradition is that it wasn't just about learning war and combat. It was actually just how can you harmonize the human being so that they're not going to act violently in the world, so that they're not going to act in a malignant way in the world. And what you need to do is you can't just train these warriors with physical combat all the time. Like we were talking about with that brilliant quote from Morihei Ueshiba, when he was saying, if you're only focusing on training the physical body, it's pointless because the power of the body is limited. And what he's hinting at there is that he's saying that there's another realm of you, the deep down you that is interconnected with all things, that energy, that chi or pranic energy that animates who you are. That is something that is unlimited. So it's as if there's an unlimited element to our consciousness, and then there's a limitation in the physical world. So the martial art tradition is playing with those limitations and trying to find ways to apply the best, most animated parts of consciousness to a physical action so that we can transcend the limitation to some extent. Because when we come back to this idea of combat, when somebody is attacking you that is stronger than you, maybe you're outnumbered, maybe they have a weapon and you don't, or whatever, you're in a disadvantageous situation, you're going to need to find a way to turn the tide to your favor, on a survival sense. So we're looking at this concept of trying to work with the energy, work with the attack, redirect the attack. And I've always very much looked at that as very much a feminine principle. And then the masculine principle comes into place with some of the more harder styles like karate, or there are elements of jiu-jitsu, of course, that are very much, they'd be looked at as more explosive or more masculine, direct type action that would be taken at the right moment. But you can't just do only the feminine principle, and you can't only use the masculine principle in training. You must be able to use both. So an example would be, attack is coming at you. Maybe somebody's just pushing you as hard as they can. They're trying to pin you up against the wall. If I only use a masculine type technique, that person might be able to overpower me. You never know. I might get away with it. But the idea is here is I'm looking to redirect the force, redirect the push, and then at the right moment, right at the right spot, I want to hit directly on. So I got to take the feminine approach first, and then right at that moment we train for, that's when the masculine and that direct response type action comes into play. So it's much easier for me to demonstrate that in a physical sense, but I hope I explained that well enough. And then what we're trying to do is take the lesson from training these techniques and take that lesson and then apply it in our everyday life. I mean, because otherwise, what are you doing? You're just studying an art. You're just studying a form of combat. If you can't take that from the training mats and apply it to your life, then I feel like it's all for nothing, really. Sure, you know how to defend yourself. That's awesome. But what kind of quality do you have in your life? And if you don't have the ability to look deeply within these different things in your life and take all the experiences of your life, whether you're out trimming the garden, mowing the grass, washing the dishes, taking the kids to the park, getting in your car, driving to work, whatever it is, if you can live with intention and with understanding that every action you produce, not just when you're doing the things you want to do, but even the things that you don't want to do, every action that you produce, when you take it from the perspective of trying to achieve that balance through the action, and of course that would take place in your own consciousness first, because that's where everything originates, the world of the causal world, and then it brings and manifests into the physical world of effects. So every action you take, there's an expression of either imbalance or balance. And so you must harmonize and balance your being, your mind, body, spirit, if you're going to have harmonious action in the world. And that's something that is very, very strong throughout the martial art tradition, and with good reason, because without that, then it's just a bunch of brutes getting together and trying to find a way to be able to dominate other human beings. And that's not at all what any of the masters that are founding these martial arts were all about. The idea with them was, no, this is about cleansing. This is about sanitizing the body, sanitizing the mind, allowing the best parts of your spirit to flow through all those channels in its full brilliance. You hear that term, let your light shine. What does that mean? Is that just some song we used to sing as kids in church or whatever? Or does that really mean something? Well, it does. It does, if you really understand what you're doing. You're a light worker. You are a magician. You are a warrior. You are a sage. You are all of these things. These are all aspects, if you think of this on a sort of esoteric level, these are all aspects that make up what we call human consciousness. And the warrior aspect, the warrior spirit, is that side of you that has the fortitude, the courage, the determination to do the right action even when it's hard. Even when it's hard. And I don't see this really emphasized that much in a lot of spiritual traditions, especially in the New Age community. You go to yoga, for example, and I'm not knocking yoga, I love yoga, but kind of the yoga community, in by and large, has become also very superficial. And they talk about this masculine, feminine, principle from the yogic tradition, which is, of course, where I believe it originated. But the thing that gets lost is really trying to understand it on a very, very deep level. They're trying to make it a little bit more aesthetic. And I can understand that because I guess it's kind of like a business thing that they have to do, and that's where everybody's head is at. But I feel like these traditions are there to help bring people back to their ancient roots, to try to bring people back to understanding that life is not just this physical, hard, situation that you're in. This is something that is beautiful. Even the struggle is beautiful. And that we need to practice in a physical arena and learn the bigger lessons in all of those actions. If you ask any artist, what they're doing on a technical level, I'm sure they can tell you how they paint and how they, I figured out how to mix this particular color with this color to get this effect, and this is my brush stroke, and I like the type 2 brush for this and the type 8 brush for that. Fine, but why are you an artist? What is it about painting that really drives you? Where's the motivation that's there? How is it that a human being can paint a painting that's never been painted before? How is that? If we're all just a hunk of matter and we're all just part of some kind of directed experiment, or we're, if you kind of look at it from a scientific perspective, it's as if we're just a bunch of animated robots or whatever. If that's true, then how can these beautiful works of art be created? Where's the source of where these things are created? Well, if you talk to someone like William Blake, he's going to talk to you about the imagination, the quality of the imagination, and how that is one of the key elements of your consciousness that is connecting you to the all, to the cosmos, to the Brahman, to God, or to the Great Spirit, or in the Taoist tradition, to the Tao, is that you're trying to get that flow in your life, to get that flow and harmony in your actions where things become easy again. You hear athletes talk about this. We're like, I was really in the zone today. I really was in the zone. Everything was working. Everything was clicking. I was reacting properly. I didn't feel like I was tired. I wasn't fatiguing as much. Everything just felt easy. I've had these experiences many times. And then you show up to the gym the next day and it's like, oh my God, am I out of shape? Everything is so hard and I couldn't, nothing was working, and you start overthinking everything and overanalyzing everything. Well, what you're seeing there is the swing between being in a balanced state, because that's why it's easy, and then you're now in an imbalanced state where everything is suddenly hard again. And I think you can't really fight that. There's no way you're going to get up and be at optimal levels every single day. That's not natural. I think there's a beauty to finding those days when you're kind of hitting the hard road or whatever. But you need to take those days, those hard days, and eventually learn those lessons that will help you stay more frequently in a harmonized state where everything is easy. So in a personal sense, for people on a practical level, try to analyze first and foremost the thoughts that are going through your mind on a regular basis. This is a very, very key exercise that will help you balance out your thinking. Pay attention is what I'm saying. Pay attention to the thoughts that you're manifesting in your mind. And then study the root of those thoughts. What are the origins of those thoughts? Maybe the thought that you're having is that there's a part of your mind that's telling you that in some way you're not good enough. You're just not cutting it. You're not meeting the standard. You'll never be as good as Johnny over there. You're at this level. You'll always be at this level. You were meant to be at this level, and that's it. You'll never grow past that. You see this negative talk that a lot of people have in their minds. A lot of times they're not going to admit to it, but if you really pay attention, you'll see that a lot of the contents of our thoughts, because most of our thoughts are not even our own thoughts, really. They're sort of a synthetic reaction to the environment, or a reaction to the people around you, or the information that you're putting into your brain every single day, all day. And we don't realize that that's just being stored in like a file folder somewhere in the back of your mind, and it just springs up every time in the background, and you don't even know it until it's there and you're thinking and you're in that state. So what we're trying to do here is pay attention to that, and that can sometimes be a bit of a struggle for people, because they're going to have to deal with a lot of their shadow, a lot of their darker emotions. They're going to have to deal with past traumas. They're going to have to deal with negative belief systems that they have about themselves. They're going to have to deal with their limits. They're going to have to deal with all kinds of things when they do that. But when you do that, you will become well. You will be on the road to healing, because you're pointing your consciousness, which is like a lighthouse light, and you're pointing it back within, and you're saying, what can I get rid of in those dark recesses of my consciousness? What can I get rid of that is blocking my mind from accessing greater potential and more holistic thought and more harmonized thought? you know? And then the same thing would be true with your body. If your body is struggling, if your body is fighting itself every single day, you're feeling weak, you're feeling sick, you have pain, everybody's got bad backs, bad knees, bad fingers, everything, right? What happened to swing the system out of balance? You went into your natural state, I believe, is balance and health. That's the natural state. That's why it feels good. That's why it feels natural. That's why it feels easy, because it's the easiest part of you to express. When you're out of balance, now everything's hard. Now everything's swinging towards the negative side of things. And you view yourself as negative. You view people and situations around you as negative. And you get into that space where you start to feel like a victim. And then you give up, and most people just implode in on themselves. It's because they've gotten out of center. So my sensei would always be saying, come back to center. Come back to center. You know, even with your position, maybe I'm standing with my right foot just slightly turned on a different kind of angle, and that's why I'm not feeling settled in my position. You know, that's why I'm not feeling quite balanced. But if I were to just turn my foot just slightly and straighten my back a little bit, now all of a sudden, you know, I'm a stronger unit. I'm acting as a stronger unit in that situation. So the same would be true with analyzing your physical health. Get rid of the blockages, find the imbalances, seek them out. Seek them out like a roach cleaner. Like you're in there trying to detoxing. Say, okay, I want to find all these negative things that are manifesting. You know, what's going on? Why do I have this dry skin? Why do I have the constant flus and colds? Why do I have headaches? Why do I have problems sleeping? Why do I have pain in my back? You know, whatever. If you go to an acupuncturist or a Reiki master or a martial arts instructor that knows what he's doing, they're right away going to be like, well, your posture's off. Your hip is off. So it's pulling on one side of your body, and it's causing those muscles to overwork. And therefore it's creating an imbalance in your physical structure. And that's why you're experiencing pain, because that pain is there to tell you something. It's not just pain to torture us. There's a reason we have pain and experience pain. If I'm in a painful situation, I have to think not about the pain. I have to turn my mind away from the pain for a second and try to identify the source of the pain. And when you identify the source of the pain, then you can achieve that harmony again. So I'm bringing in these elements because I want people to understand how universal this principle is, this yin-yang force. This is the force of electromagnetism, of the opposites, the polarities. You've got, in all these ancient traditions, they tell you through mythology, you've got like Shiva and Shakti, you've got, you've got even the Trinity concept in some of these religions, you know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, etc. And if you look at that not as a literal story, and you understand that it's an allegory, that it's something that is there to teach you a fundamental lesson about the nature of reality, then you'll understand that they're trying to talk about balance. They're trying to talk about the different elements that make up who you are and how to bring those elements together. If you look at the Trinity concept, you'll see, you know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Well, you could also be like mind, body, spirit, right? And see those same three principles expressed throughout that. So it always comes back to that personal level. So I hope I'm not jumping around too much there, but I really want to stress how excited I was when I started realizing how universal this principle was and how practical it is. This isn't just something that you read in a book and you think about it in some philosophical way. This is something that you can apply to your life to change things in your life, to start winning, to start achieving victory in your life. I think a lot of people are afraid of winning. They talk down about it. They're like, oh, that person, you know, they succeeded. Good for them. I wish I could succeed. I wish I could be the one that won. I wish I was the one that was healthy and strong and vibrant. And we start comparing ourselves to those other people when in fact you are that. You haven't fully understood that yet. And you've started to adopt those negative belief systems that are stopping you from growing so that you can achieve those amazing things in your life. And so the martial arts is there to teach you in a practical way on a physical level. Okay, this is how we work with these techniques. This is how the body works. This is how energy works. This is how polarity works. And now take that and apply it to the way you think about yourself. Take that and apply it to your daily activities and try to work and operate in a very balanced way. And that's what we're trying to achieve here is balance. When we're analyzing the things on the big geopolitical stage, you know, how are we looking at that? Are we avoiding looking at what we call the negative things that are happening in the world? Are we avoiding watching some of these atrocities that are taking place in other countries as a result of the illegal and tyrannical actions of our governments here? And are we looking and analyzing into what it is socially and politically that went wrong to create this imbalance in our social or in our society and in our world? What is it that's causing it? That's what we have to start looking at. We can't turn away from that. And on the other side, you can't overdose yourself by just sitting in that dark room every day looking at the most evil, twisted stuff imaginable and looking at the very dark underbelly of the world every day and downloading that all the time, because then you'll do what a lot of people that I know in this movement have done, and you'll give up. You'll realize that it's a very, very, huge task ahead of humanity at this time to fully come back to a state of health again, and you're going to start feeling depressed and overwhelmed. So you have to take that time to put that oxygen mask on again before assisting others, like you're told in the airplane before they take off. You have to take that time and balance your life so that, okay, I'm aware of what's going on. I'm aware of the problems, in the world, politically or whatever, but I also must be aware of the problems in my own mind and my own body. And I must heal that, because that's what I have control over. That's what I can take direct action on. And I think what's tended to happen is a lot of people that get into this movement, this can become very easily a form of escapism from the inner turmoil that everybody is dealing with. And they're not able to harmonize that masculine, feminine principle inside of themselves. So it's easy to just go and throw mud at Bilderberg and the Rockefellers and the Zionists and all in the terrorists and all of that. It's easy to just always look at that and never look within and deal with your own house. And so that's why the balancing force is so key to all of these different fields, from the individual level all the way up to the collective level.
Well, you've really described those two fundamental forces so well, David, and I just feel that it's a dance of the two. No, it seems to be a kind of constant dance between the two, and perhaps you've mentioned there a number of times this skill of awareness and paying attention to what's happening, and I think perhaps we're going to take a closer look at awareness in the next session, and that will be something that helps us identify this masculine feminine dynamic in our own lives, around us and obviously within us. So I'm going to look forward to hearing how we can increase and focus our awareness as well.
Absolutely. And sorry, if I could I just jump in quick, Louise? You made me think of one final thing. I told you I would never shut up.
Keep going.
You were talking about, it's kind of like a dance. That's an amazing example. In fact, that example might help people more than a martial art focus at this time if they've never looked into that. We all like to dance, we all look at some young couple dancing, at either they're at their wedding or at prom or something. We're like, oh, look at them. They're so sweet, right? Because a lot of dances, if you look historically at dances, they are totally exhibiting the masculine feminine principle on every level. You look at the tangos, you look at some of the stronger style dances, and I'm not an amazing dancer at all. That's my wife. But I've looked at it, and we watch, the dance competitions and stuff, just because I like seeing, how the movement, I'm very fascinated by movement, and dance is an amazing way to look at it. And when you look at two people that are they're technically mastery, they have technical mastery, they're moving fluidly together, you will see from both the man and the woman, actually, you will see the feminine and masculine movements shown. You will see a man demonstrating more feminine, smooth, circular type movements, and then you'll see the woman, demonstrating more square, strong, straight, powerful, strong movements as well. And they play off each other. And I think that dance is really trying to symbolize that force in nature and that universal force. If you look at the whirling dervishes out of Sufism, and so many other ancient cultures, this goes all the way back. And some of these dances, by the way, were actually mapped to constellations. A lot of people might not know that, but when you look at certain ballets and you watch the foot patterns of how they're moving forward and backwards and circling and coming around, some of them are actually, people have mapped them out to actually show that some of these dances were to dance with the stars. As we see in some of these shows, you're dancing with the stars. Well, of course you're dancing with the stars because you are symbolizing through movement a constellation that you're seeing overhead. And the ancient astrologers would tell you, well, there's no difference between what you see overhead and what you see within. So if you throw that back into the martial art thing, now you'll see that this is a different kind of dance, is it not? It's some people may call it the dance of death. They might call it the hard dance or whatever, but it's a movement on a different level, and there is an ebb and a flow between you and your partner. In Japanese, they have the concept of the uki and the tori. The uki is the one who is the attacker, and the tori is the one who's executing the technique. And there's a dance and an interplay between those two forces. So it is another form of dance if you want to think of it like that.
Definitely. No, because that's very fluid, and to me it speaks of life, and this whole dynamic that we can actually see all around us once we learn how to look and observe this principle. I think we can find it everywhere. So it's such an interesting aspect, and particularly perhaps in the arena, if you like, of activism. If I can ask you, David, because you've mentioned there, the principle, if you're under attack, and many would say that we are under attack from various angles. If we're under attack, we don't want to be meeting it with attack, right? This is creating more conflict, anger, and all the other things that we see boiling up and boiling over. How would you meet it, do you think? How would you meet this with a balanced dynamic of the male and female? Can you give us an example of how this might look? What attitude to take? What reflection on, as you say, on our thoughts as we look at what's happening? Do we ask ourselves first, or how would you apply this?
That's a very, very good question, Louise, and I think about it all the time. I've been to activist rallies. I've been down to Occupy Wall Street. I've been to Monsanto protests. I've been, traveled around and really just tried to talk to people at these events and look to see, talk to the police. A lot of people, look at the police. Oh, a bunch of bad guys over there. Let's just make them into even more, make them our enemy even more, by completely alienating them. What I try to do is actually start a conversation and just look them in the eyes, keep it on a human level. I know that this person standing there is probably in a belief system that they are there to serve and protect, and they are doing what they believe is right. Some people are there because they're just, it's an ego trip and they really don't give a shit, and they're doing whatever they want to do with their power. But when you talk to people on a human level, no matter who they are, you will find out if that is truly a person that can be reasoned with, or if they are just, a sociopath and they don't care, and you're just going to have to leave that situation. But many times I've tried to just look at these people as they are fathers, they are husbands, they are wives, they are mothers, they are children, they are somebody's children, And if you look at them from that perspective, you're not looking at them as an enemy. You're looking at them as an opponent. And there's two different things. An enemy, would be someone that is there, it's the opposer, sure, but you're creating an enemy because, you need to fight against them, you need to conquer them in some way, or you need to better them in some way. They're creating an enemy against the human race by they, I mean, the controlling factors of our modern civilization, whatever you want to say that is sort of creating an enemy dynamic and a divisionary dynamic between sort of an us and them kind of situation. And then we keep aggravating that more by allowing to continue to play their game. So if you go back to something like the art of war, they would say the highest skill, the warrior of the highest skill, is one who can subdue their enemy without even fighting them, without even engaging them. So what you're trying to do here is, pull support away would be the best thing to do. Pull support away from those aspects of the system or whatever that are a twist or an inversion on freedom or truth or liberty or justice. Justice is really another great analogy with the balancing force, because is it not symbolized by a female character holding the scales of justice? Well, what is that all about? Well, of course, the scales are there to demonstrate balance. So here we come again. Justice is achieved when balance is achieved. So on either side of this conflict that's happening, if one side is taking things to one extreme, then they'll instigate an actual physical confrontation, or vice versa. And we see this a lot at some of these protest rallies where you've got people that are, singing peacefully, and they're just, they're holding up signs or singing Kumbaya or whatever. And then all of a sudden the police are just coming in and running them over and arresting them and throwing them into prison or whatever. And then on the other side, you have times when the police weren't engaged in trying to do any kind of unjust arrest or any of that kind of stuff. I've seen that many times. And then you have people from the crowd that are instigating things and throwing rocks at the police and going up and calling them names and saying, and just screaming at them, "You're part of the beast, you're a whore of Babylon," or whatever. I've heard so many things. And what is that doing? That's throwing gasoline on the fire is what that's doing. And that might help you feel good in the moment. It always is like that, is it not? In any conflict, when your anger takes over and you lose yourself in that moment. Well, that's just going to create more of that fight. You're going to instigate the fight. And I constantly talk to people every day when we train them in martial arts, especially children, especially people that are in the police force or whatever, that now that you have training, you could be a very dangerous person, right? Now that you have this power, well, with that comes great responsibility. And with that comes the duty to uphold actual justice. Okay. And that doesn't mean taking justice into your own hands, becoming a vigilante and just running around and shooting up all the bad guys. That means keeping things in a state of balance, approaching situations in a correct way, and looking at things from a perspective of efficiency. We're always looking in martial arts for the most efficient way to stop a conflict from happening. Not just to go in there and fight like it's Tekken or something, like we're having this big battle and we're just trying to fight to see who's the best fighter. I mean, that's just for fun. The real force here is to try to stop conflict. All of the techniques that I teach are designed to stop conflict. If a fight happens because somebody, you've got your hands up, you're saying, "Hey, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. I'm a man of peace. I don't have any money. I'm here doing my thing." And then the person continues past that point. Well, then you have to do what's necessary to stop the fight from happening and bring that situation back to equilibrium again. So when you look at these types of things from that perspective, you're going to see that by grabbing a bunch of guns and storming the castle and all these violent revolutions we've seen throughout history are really just instigating a bigger problem. It's kind of like the gang problem in LA or wherever you go, in Toronto, where I was coming from, where, one team member of the gang gets taken out by another gang. Well, then that gang's just going to go back and retaliate, and they're going to get their revenge. And then that's going to keep perpetuating a cycle of violence, right? So it's taking it completely out of the balance dynamic. Whereas, the way to heal that situation is to leave that situation in many cases, is to stop being engaged in that and to, just let the past be the past, move on. And there is a healing that needs to take place socially and politically right now. Absolutely. Do we need to rout out some tyrannical evildoers? Absolutely. But how are we going to do that? Are we going to do it the way it's always been done in the past that's never worked? You've got that quote from William Blake where he says, "The hand that crushed the tyrant's head arose a tyrant in its stead." Think about that. Is that what we're going to do? We're going to keep replacing one tyranny for another over and over again until we learn this lesson. The way is not to fight against the system. The way is to create a new system from within the system until that makes the old system obsolete, as Buckminster Fuller would say. So I think that what we're looking at here is a more intelligent approach to being efficient at solving these problems. And I'm not really sure myself what the exact answer is. That's why I meet with great minds and I discuss these problems and these questions with the smartest people I can find, because we do need a solution. But I know the formula. I do know the formula, and I believe the formula exists in this warrior tradition where they're trying to say, look, it has to be in line with natural law. It has to be about justice in its truest form. It has to be balanced. And it has to be efficient in achieving the result that we want. So we have to be efficient. We haven't been efficient in the past. Humanity has let the emotional side take over too many times. And we've continued to be in the situation that we're in. We might achieve, you look at like the founding of America, for example. We may achieve a little moment of brilliance, a little moment of, okay, we finally secured ourselves from these opposing forces or whatever. But then what happened? What happened to America now? Okay, look at that. Well, it's proven itself out, hasn't it? That maybe it started out on the right foot, but something happened where it got taken over, and it's like what happened in the fall of the Roman Empire is taking place now, right? And you can look at history for thousands of examples of this. And what happens is that it's eroded from within. It's eroded from within. Morality, this is a huge part of this. And it was a huge part of the presentation that I gave, which is that morality and freedom are synonymous. They are an expression of the masculine feminine principle. When you have less morality, and morality is linked to justice, by the way. Those moral tenets we looked at the last section, Louise, that people can review. Those are the ingredients for achieving harmony and balance. Those are the ingredients. If you want to have balance with your family, with your friends, with whatever, then you need to practice morality. And with that, you will achieve more freedom in your life. So morality and freedom are synonymous. And the only limit that's there is a limit that we all come together as a society to agree on, that these are universal limits that we're going to have in place specifically to promote freedom. Not just limitation for the sake of limitation, like what we see with all these draconian illegal laws that are coming in to enslave the people of, Western civilization or whatever. Or even you look in the Middle East, you look at something like Sharia law, or some of these horribly medieval, archaic ideas of what justice is, which are completely skewed and ridiculous. That's not justice. That's an overly masculine approach to the situation. So what we're trying to do is educate people on how first you can achieve the balance within. If we as individuals cannot cleanse our own minds and our own bodies and our own existence, then there's no way as a society that we're all going to be able to get together and fix all of these problems. It's just not going to happen. And some of the greatest minds that ever put pen to paper have labored for years and for centuries to try to tell people this. And these are the people that are suppressed. These are the people nobody has the time to read. These are the people that get shunned by society because they're telling the truth. They're telling you the way out. They're giving you the solution, and they're giving it to you wrapped in a nice little pink bow. And we have to look at it and go, oh my goodness, we've been given the solutions from these people from the past already. There's been great minds that have faced these challenges in the past. They have written down the recipe for success on how we can deal with it no matter what age we live in. And it's time we looked at these things and really tried to bring them into our modern time. And then, yes, update them, contemporize them, make them more applicable. We do this in the martial arts. We're taking techniques that maybe were used to take a guy off a horse, back in the day. That might not be practical to some mom that just wants to learn some self-defense. She's not going to be engaging in lancing somebody off a horse. So that's not a technique we need to focus on. Maybe we just need to focus on, how to make sure she's got her hands up and she's got awareness and she knows how to get into a safer situation. So if we're doing it with these physical techniques, we have to do it with this philosophy and this understanding of how we can take this knowledge and mold it to suit our current situation. And so that's probably the longest winded answer I can give, and I hope it gives some clarity.
I'm sure you could break that record, David. We'll give you another opportunity with another question another time, and we'll put you to the test. But thank you so much. These views are very enlightening, I feel, and really give us some very sound guidelines as to, the way forward, which many masters of many traditions have pointed out to us indeed. But I'm very grateful for you to come along and remind us, and in this very clear and dynamic way. So again, thank you, David. And for people listening, please do go and check out all the information and links to David's interviews, which are fascinating, and also go to great depth at thewayoftetruthwarrior.com, and come back and listen to the next session, where I think we're going to learn how to cultivate our awareness. Again, another essential aspect of this whole journey that we're on at the moment. So thank you, David. Be well, and speak to you soon.
Thank you, Louise.